Hello, 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 folks. It's Monday morning.
Good morning, everybody from beautiful sunny California.
Yes. If little windy.
Just a little bit. Just a little
uh,
bit.
for those of you who don't know, I was recently in San Francisco hanging with my brother Eric, and then it just really shocked me how windy it was. My God.
It is incredibly windy, and I mean we always have an Indian summer here, and it keeps getting pushed farther and farther back. But this is pretty windy for it being May.
Yeah, no, no kidding. I mean, I'm a small person, and I felt like I was being blown away. I mean, literally. Yeah. Anyhow, hi Dolores and hi Kay and hi Jeffrey. Thank you for tuning in. Um, we try not to be, it's Monday morning and all, so we try not to be such a downer, but I think it's inevitable, talking about current news.
But we put our own positive spin on it.
We
And
should.
And the other
Okay.
thing,
Yeah,
hold on. The fact is that we are both organizers, so we're not going to
that's true.
take this lying down to take
That's true.
a note from our beloved Laura Fielding's book.
Yes.
So, another day, another action, and we will talk about the action that we have planned actually tomorrow.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
All right, I will share the slides.
let's get right into it.
There you go. All right, covers media news, Monday, May 9th. First story, okay. I can't be cheerful for this, okay, but new report indicates one in five Americans partly blame Asian Americans for the spread of COVID-19. Okay. So when I saw this news, I was like, okay, I was telling Eric, okay, I tend to be naive about a lot of things, but I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, is this like even for real? I mean, how can people be so stupid to believe that?
Well, we were incredibly stupid to is it stupid or is it good business to enslave an entire race of people for nothing more than the color of their skin? And fast forward to the situation that we're in now. Um, okay, I'll admit this 1 in 5 number to me is very scary. I think that that's very, very high. Um, but again, Tsukuru and I were kind of just discussing the notes before the program started, and this doesn't just come from nowhere. And what I think a lot of people are not admitting, what a lot of people are not realizing, is that many of the things that we attribute to the Trump era are actually being continued in this administration as well,
Yeah,
um, in different ways. But let's talk about this one in particular. I remember it more towards the beginning of his administration. I think that there's a lot going on in the world now,
mhm.
inflation, Ukraine, etc. Um, excuse me. But Biden never lost or never missed, I should say, an opportunity to
Mm,
say things about Beijing this and Beijing that and to spread, anti-Asian sentiment. And his friend, his little accomplice Pelosi,
mhm.
she has followed in those footsteps, and she will openly criticize the Chinese government. And I just,
Mhm.
who the hell are you to talk about human rights violations in China? Like, with all due respect, Madam Speaker,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
Madam, we'll talk about that a little later.
Right,
But
right, right. God. Yeah,
uh,
no, yeah, we will talk about that later, but no, you are right though. So, as I was telling Eric before the show, it really, really, really frustrates me when people say, "Oh yeah, Trump started this." okay, he may have started it, but as Eric said, I mean, the Biden administration is not innocent in all of
Oh,
this. I
I
mean, he
completely.
maintained this anti-Asian, anti-China stance. Um, you know, he instigates fear in people that China is ready to attack us. You know, and it's not helping. It's not helping Biden. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah.
Sukru, I'm sorry. You're so nice. You're so nice. Like, this man was talking about hanging out with segregationists this week. Like, not helping. Not, I mean, not helping, but like, come on, the guy's a crug. And I think he's at the point in his life where kind of blurring the lines between sanity and I don't know what the state of his mind
Mm,
is. But he's just the things that he's spitting out, that's the shit that's been there all along. That's what
mm.
it is.
Right, right. And I mean, okay, so I know we're gonna talk about Nancy later on, but I just can't help. Okay, correct me because I always like fuck up her last name. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Jackie Spear or Jackie Spear?
Fear.
Spear, okay.
Fear.
I know she is resigning or she's not running next term. I mean, this time, right? I know who is running in that district, but so last year it came to my attention that Jackie Spear, she sends like monthly newsletter to her constituents or whoever sign up for her email, and on one particular newsletter, I mean, she has this like book recommendations in every newsletter, like 2 books, I think, per newsletter. So one of the books was like clearly this like anti-China, instigating war with China, written by a notable, um, conservative think tank, right? And that was like her book recommendations. It came to our attention, like meaning our attention, meaning Asian American community, anti-war activists in the area. So we actually had a meeting with one of her aides. I mean, okay, she did not even apologize for this.
Yeah.
Our demand was like, okay, please retract this. Please take this off your list, and please, make it clear to your constituents that you are not recommending this book. And we actually even suggested more, another book like written with more neutral perspective. Okay, to be fair, right?
Mhm.
I mean, okay, what I'm trying to say is it's not only Biden, it's not only Nancy, but I mean, come on, Democrats. And it upsets me, especially in the cities or in the area like the San Francisco Bay Area, where there are a lot of Asians who um who practically made it possible for you to be in your seat and betray the Asian community like this. I don't know. It's just really really upsetting. It is upsetting. I'm outraged.
No, we were talking about this earlier, and to shift from Spear to Pelosi, it can be argued that the Chinese, specifically the Chinese community in San Francisco, um, keep Nancy Pelosi in her seat.
Yeah.
Um, they are 40% of San Francisco. They are incredibly unified, and they are incredibly politically involved.
Mm,
And like you were saying earlier, Sukru, they were historically they are very loyal to the Democratic Party.
yep.
So my mindset almost goes like, what? Like you know this, Nancy. Like this isn't even good politics. Like um and you're having the exact same effect that Trump did when he started calling this, the Kung flu, and when anytime he picked a different group, he targeted a different group to speak bad upon. What did we almost immediately notice happening? We saw an increase in hate crimes in every respective
Mm,
group that he would talk about. And I don't understand why when a Democrat does it, it's, it's not as bad, or we don't really notice it. We don't really talk about it, but the effects can be just as detrimental, if not worse, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Even countries,
And I know I'm sidetracking, but I just,
please.
as an anti-nuclear
Billy,
activist,
look
I
who you're
just want
talking to.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, brother. I just want to point out, as a anti-nuclear activist, I just have to point out, okay, so this anti-China rhetoric, I mean, Biden, he totally use it for justifying, our military budget, right?
Mhm.
And our nuclear budget. Do you guys know that Biden's nuclear budget is bigger, even bigger than Trump's?
A lot bigger.
He successfully, increased our nuclear budget, you know, uh, based on this rhetoric that, oh yeah, China is going to get us, so we have to, modernize our weapons, you know. And I mean, this is happening in the midst of the pandemic, when a lot of people suffering, a lot of people on the street without homes, without food to eat, right? I mean, and our government is spending like tons, shit tons of money on modernizing our nuclear weapons. I mean, anyway,
Yeah, don't get me started on the military budget and because if I'm not mistaken, isn't it like Biden has asked for an obscene amount, right? But then even
Oh,
even past the obscene amounts that he asks for, Congress ends up approving a larger amount, right? Each time.
yep. Mm,
But it's not like we have people out on the street, and it's not like, we have 68,000 people dying of healthcare. Um, the United States is not a country, folks. We're a corporation. And each party that is in power has done nothing but further the interest of the corporation. Of course,
mm,
countries don't deny their citizens an education. Countries don't deny their citizens the right to healthcare. Who does that? Corporations do.
mm.
If you could trade the United States on the stock market, I'm sure, you know, which
Oh well,
I mean, it's not a completely wrong extension, right? The strength of the stock market is more or less stock in the United States,
mm-hmm.
which is comprised of the world's largest corporate. Anyway,
God, oh, hold on, I am wrong. Okay,
but
yeah.
yes, Brandy, you're right. It is as bad, no matter the party. And
Mm,
actually, again, I would argue that I think that what the Democrats are doing is even more harmful, because they have this very subtle way of doing it, and they manage to keep the trust of the American people. We associate them,
yep.
I mean, the media sure does, associates them with being the nice guys, the party
Mm,
of the working class. We're going to talk about this later, but honestly, based on a lot of these guys' actions, I I'm convinced that a lot of these top Democrats have been pro-life all along.
mm, mm.
Yeah, I said it. I wholeheartedly believe that, and anyway, we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to yes. Okay, so speaking of nuclear and radiation, so this news is talking about, okay, this is the next, okay, so this school grounds, in New Jersey, mysteriously nearly 100 people at the school got brain tumors, kind of rare form of brain tumors, and they are demanding answers, which is pretty scary. And but I hear actually, similar things all the time, unfortunately. Doesn't have to be radioactive waste, but toxic contamination. And people may be like living or going to school or working on the contaminated grounds, and they don't even know it. And then like years later, people start to get sick, and then people start to wonder, okay, why? This is very, very unusual. So anyway, yeah, I have actually this news. It's like it's reported by New York Post. Um, yeah. So this is yeah. Where is it? Colonia High School. Yeah, Colonia High School in the Woodbridge Township School District. So it's like 94 former staff and students from this high school got this rare form of brain tumor. So they're demanding answers, and actually, kind of, I'm gonna skip to the end of the article. So, they are actually, they don't know what's causing this yet. They actually are, just have started like investigation. So, it's not really confirmed, but, so the school was built back in 1967 on acres of empty land. And, this, Al Lupiano, who is one of the survivors. Okay, so Lupiano told New Jersey Spotlight News that the school is located less than 12 miles from the Middlesex sampling plant, a site that was used under the direction of the Manhattan Project to crush, dry, store, package, and ship uranium ore for the
Oh,
development of the atomic bomb, right? So he alleges that some contaminated soil was removed from the site when it closed down in 1967, the same year the school was built, right? So Lupiano is wondering whether some of the soil ended up on the school grounds. Yeah. So that's some scary
geez.
shit,
I wonder. I wonder.
Yeah.
Okay, so not to, again, like you were saying, not to go off on a tangent. Thank you. Being able to blow up people in other countries tells you how much human lives matter. I would take it a step further. This is some really sick, twisted shit when you're killing your own people. You know what I mean? And this is why capitalism is so goddamn dangerous. The small number of people who are benefiting from this system,
Mm.
you know, it's how on earth are we equating that to the millions of people that we are putting, we're enslaving in debt, that are being sick with things like long COVID, things like different types of cancer from all the radioactive dump sites that we have. The fact that there's a term super site, right?
Yeah.
The fact that that's a
Yeah.
thing, and you start looking down the list, and almost always these are never in affluent communities. They're always in communities of color.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually curious about what the demographics of this school are, because and this town, because the
Mm.
fact that they were able to get this amount of data together, like, again, I'm not trying to discredit any one case, but here in San Francisco in Baby Hunters Point, we have
Mm.
over 9,000 cases,
Yeah.
individuals who have gotten cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and why isn't that making the freaking headlines? Like Sucre was saying, they assembled parts of the atom bomb here in freaking San
Yep.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? Wow, this
Wow.
went to Middlesex schools from kindergarten to 5th grade. What is this community like? Is it a working class community? Is it upper middle class? I'm curious, because, again, the fact that they were able to accumulate this data and it made it to a
Mm-hmm.
fairly reputable
Mm-hmm.
publication.
Yeah, Eric, what shocked me about Baby Hunter's Point is so until the Dr. Ahimsa, she came in and started her own program. There was nobody in the neighborhood doing the study, and it's like it just really, I mean, like 2019, right, when she started. And I mean, contamination's there from like the wartime.
Right.
So I mean, it really shocked me. Like it has taken so many years, and it has taken one private individual to start this. It was not like state supported. I mean, of course, they wanted to hide this, so I guess of course, it's not state supported, but it just really shocked me that it took all these years, to for someone to start collecting evidence. You know,
But over $1 billion of federal funds has been dumped into that community over administrative BS, like testing sites that don't really do their job. The speaker, she understands, not pretty sure now, but was pretty much middle class working people when I was a kid. Okay, interesting. I was curious, but back to what we were saying. Speaker Pelosi has dumped tons of federal funds into Bayview Hunters Point. And every year, maybe every 2 years around election season, she always sends out this pamphlet that has multiple sections, and one of the large sections is always dedicated to Bayview Hunters Point. It's like she knows that she needs to at least look like she cares about that neighborhood. Um, it really goes back to this idea that you and me, us commoners, not even just me and Tsukuru, but anybody watching this, like, we have this idea about what's going on, and some of us, I think, just because of the sheer audacity and just because of like what is actually like, how can this be? Some of us, at least maybe only me, sometimes I think like, wow, do the people in power not know about this? Like, is this just something that I'm aware of because I'm a working class individual who has to, get up in the morning and get to work? But the truth is, like, the federal government, they have the best information about all this. If anybody knows what's going on, it's them.
Yep. Yeah.
And we have no business making excuses for politicians, Democrat, Republican, I don't care. And I'll, again, not to go off on a tangent, but it's really, really scary that, I mean, how much more do they have to show who they are? The day after the leak happened with the Roe v. Wade, what is it, docket notes from the Supreme Court, the top 3 Democrats in the House run to Texas to support an anti-abortion incumbent. And then, okay, so Tsukuru, we have been in front of the speaker's house many times.
Yep.
For different campaigns, different causes. I will never forget, I believe it was the last time at Dia de los Muertos when it was sprinkling. I was actually very impressed by the crowd that we had because I picked the smallest hill for us to go up, but it was still a significant hill.
Oh yeah. Right.
But I was very pleased with the showing that we had and the solidarity, the speakers, etc. Remember what happened when a car drove by?
Yeah.
Actually, why don't you tell it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, right? I actually did not look at them, so I don't know what. But I think I would say like they are Caucasian women. But anyway, so car drove by. I think they stopped for a second, and we hear woman's voice saying, "We love you, Nancy," or something like that. I don't remember like exact words, but and it really shocked me at that moment. It was like an epiphany to me. Like, okay, this is actually what we are fighting with, fighting against. Yeah, okay. So we were protesting Nancy that day, but this is like what we have to fight against, right? Because people who are comfortable, people who are actually not suffering in the current situation. I mean, surprisingly, I mean, I just can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I can't understand them, but somehow they're completely satisfied. They're completely, satisfied with keeping the status quo, such as Nancy Pelosi and Democratic Party.
Let me paint the scene a little better. Granted,
Okay.
we are standing, you know, if you've been to Nancy Pelosi's house, she literally lives at the beginning of a, what do you call those? Dead end street.
Cul-de-sac?
Cul-de-sac. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have a group of people standing in front of her garage with Medicare for All. We brought a damn coffin with 68,000 painted on it. You know, like the whole point of the rally was that it was a funeral procession from the park to her house in memory of all the people that have died to our for-profit healthcare system. How dare you not even blink an eye, just completely disregard all of that. And yeah, let's give this woman another 2 years. Like, what on earth?
But you know, okay, I hate to say it. Okay, I'm actually, maybe this is like another subject, but okay, but I am actually making my point. It's the same point that I was making. I hate to say who this is, so I won't say like clearly who it is, but this is my family member, not Japanese side, my adopted family, American family. So somebody in my family who is very comfortable with their situation. When I was, speaking to them about protesting in front of Nancy Pelosi's, they said, well, she's a human being too. Maybe we should be kind to her. We should be compassionate.
Oh, God.
And
first of all, I don't agree that she's a human being. I think she's a shell. So that you lost me there. Anyway, continue. God.
No, I mean, the thing is, okay, the point I'm making, again, there are people who are comfortable with the situation, with the current situation. They're not suffering, and they are perfectly happy to keep the status quo, and which scares me. How can you be so blind to like what is happening, out on the street? It's so obvious when you go out on the streets that there are houseless people like more than ever. It's like if you go out right now, like to I mean, okay, so this is kind of like a local stuff, so I kind of have to explain, but it's like there's a shopping center called Beverly Center in LA, which stands on this street called La Cienega, and that neighborhood is like rich. I mean, it's kind of fancy, it's a fancy shopping district, right? But I mean, even there right now, there's a tent city. I mean, you can't ignore it. It's kind of surreal because there are people with money shopping and dining on the street, and they're practically looking at these people who are on the street, living in the tents, right? So I guess, I mean, what I'm trying to say is like it's so obvious. You can't say, "Oh, I didn't know."
Right.
Things are happening, bad things are happening in this country, but there are people who are perfectly comfortable with what they have, that they are not willing to change the situation. They're not willing to, like, say, vote against Nancy Pelosi.
But you know what? I want to take things a step further. That the disinformation campaigns and the way that the powers that be have really separated us. We also have so many people who vote purely selfishly for their own interests. And I'm again, not to go off on a tangent, but this is relevant. So one of the reasons why I particularly like to give the Mission Food Tour here in San Francisco is I get to be a little more political than I am in some of my other tours. People understand that that's what they're signing up for. Mm-hmm. And we took out a corporate group. So this tour is getting very popular with corporate groups, which again, my pleasure and honor to be able to talk about what's happened in the mission to some of these quote unquote higher ups. But I took this group out last week, and I remember we literally walked past a tent city, and then Tsukuru's taken my tour. So there's a part of the tour where I go off of the main strip just to talk about, we go down an alley and then we come up a residential street literally just to showcase the different housing types that there are in the Mission District. And on that route, we passed by a tent city. And I remember I talked about how here in San Francisco, there's more than 4 empty units for every person that is unhoused on the street. And I remember that an individual in the group is a big Italian neighborhood. New Jersey is terrible. Wow. Anyway, just back to the demographics of the high school, this high school we're talking about in New Jersey. Anyway, I just remember that one of the people in the group, and sometimes, you'll get that where it's just one person has got to keep you on your toes. They've just got to sharp up and make their little comments. And she pushed back on the information. She's like, really? Like, is that really the case? And I said, again, very professionally, I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, the Board of Supervisors is introducing a home vacancy tax to tax landlords because it's better the reason why this is happening is it's better for them tax-wise to leave the units empty, write it off as a loss, than to offer them at an affordable rate. It's very much a manufactured problem. And again, she didn't push back a little bit, or she pushed back a little more, but she kind of eased up after she saw, again, with all due respect, I just got done running for Congress. This is something I kind of know about. So anyway, I just remember thinking to myself after the tour, and I was like, based on who this group was, I would not be surprised if this woman owns a couple properties. I would not be surprised. And I'm thinking to myself, like, is that what you're doing? You're writing off these properties as a loss? And that's beneficial to you tax-wise. And then furthermore, to tie this back into what we were talking about, this group was, I think there was maybe one white male. Again, it was what I'm trying to say is it was a very diverse group of people of color, again, a corporate group. But I'm thinking to myself, like, you would think that if anyone, would be more understanding, would be more receptive, would be more sympathetic to the needs of working class people, it would be, an immigrant or a person of working class. And that's not always the case. And that's actually a wrong assumption most of the time. And it just blew my mind, and then again, not to get off on another tangent, but another thing I remember before the Trump election, like, people were very quiet about their support of Trump, but there was a lot more support in San Francisco. Like, it would blow your mind how much, like, the number of support. Again, not enough to swing the election, but when you went back and looked, the neighborhoods with like the highest concentration of working class and immigrants, those are the ones that went for Trump. That had the highest concentration of Trump voters. And again, the powers that be have done such a good job of dividing us, have done such a good job of pitting us against each other, that I hope it's not too late before we realize that the only way that we're getting out of this is together. We really have to unify. We really have to, it really is a class struggle. And there are so much more of us working class people than corporate America, right? Than the powers that be. And we really don't have time to figure this out. And, the example I always think of is when people are like, oh, you're never going to get your student loans canceled. And it's like, wipe that smirk off your face, idiot. You really think this is you dumbass? In 20 years, when you can't get any geriatric care in the United States because nobody wants to become a doctor? Or how about when you have kids one day, or grandkids, right? And they can't find any teachers because nobody wants to become a teacher. Here in San Francisco, again, I say this all the time, the city that has given me everything, right? I didn't come from money, but I came from a city that had a lot of resources. 25% of the students here, of the children under 18 that live in San Francisco, attend private school. 25%. Anyway, let me get off my tangent.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So before going to the next segment, I just have to point out, because not like my favorite subject, but the subject that I know about. So this, nuclear waste, nuclear contamination, or, in this case, I guess, we don't know yet. They are just started to investigate this site, but I just want to point out that, because I have, since I'm an anti-nuke activist, I have conversations, with people all the time about nuclear power generation, and I do talk to people who are somewhat on the edge or somewhat for nuclear power generation, and they try to tell me all the time that, well, it's nuclear technology is already there. It's cheaper to use it than trying to develop or cultivate newer technologies such as renewables. um, and so every time that conversation comes up, what I say is like, okay, but what about nuclear waste? Because currently there's no technology to say, like, to get rid of nuclear waste. I mean, nuclear waste, I mean, as long as we are doing nuclear power generation, there will be nuclear waste, which we currently do not know like what to do with right now. And most cases, if you have nuclear power plant in your neighborhood, or doesn't have to be in your like immediate neighborhood, but nuclear waste is actually being stored near that site, because we do not have any other ways right now. And nuclear waste is not a dormant garbage. It's not like a regular garbage that you can just like put it somewhere and like forget about it. Because it has to be managed to be safe. So, like, case in point, like, okay, there is, in California, in the state of California, there's only one operating nuclear power plant, and there's one down south, between Los Angeles and San Diego, that's being decommissioned, right? San Onofre is the name. And even though it's decommissioned, nuclear waste is there. So what they started to do with that site, and it's a huge issue right now locally, is that they bury bury nuclear waste in this very thin canister, uh less than like 1 inch, canister. I mean, the wall of the canister is less than 1 inch, is what I'm trying to say. So in this, they put nuclear waste in these canisters, and they lower it into the ground, but within less than 100 feet from the shore.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's what they're doing right now. And few years ago, they actually had a near miss accident. I mean, it didn't end up being an accident. The thing was, like, they were lowering this canister into the ground, and they nearly dropped it. So if they had dropped it, it would have triggered Chernobyl scale accident. Okay, so so yeah, this is, I'm just telling you because for anyone who thinks that, oh, about nuclear, power plant accident, the chances of having it is like less than you being on the freeway and getting into a car accident. uh it may be the case, but
Still too
when
high.
something happens,
It's devastating.
it's just not, it's not, there's no going back. Look at Fukushima, there's no going back. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, I just had to say that.
But it should be enough. Chernobyl, Fukushima, like that should be more freaking Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That should have we not learned from the horrors of the past that like nuclear weapons and nuclear militarization, that's something you don't want to touch.
Mm. And the crazy thing is, so I mean, there are so many like viable technologies out there right now, like renewable technologies, and like I just don't understand. Okay, I do understand, because there are rich people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk investing in nuclear technologies. But I mean, we should be pursuing alternative technologies. We don't have to be stuck with nuclear technologies, right? So anyway, um, okay. So shall we talk about this, Eric?
Let's give some context before we get into this, which is obviously very jargony, and we're going to break it up because I think this is actually one of the more, not that everything that we've talked about isn't important, but this is, I think, incredibly interesting and incredibly well put together, the way that this article was organized. And I took two chunks of it. Yes, it looks big, but again, we're going to break it down. Um, this slide is talking about red states. The next slide is going to talk about blue states. But this is an article written by Robert Reich, who was the Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton. He is a teacher, a professor at UC Berkeley. Not everybody likes this guy, and I understand. He's earned my respect. I watched a documentary that he created about inequality, and for me, somebody with his experience and his background to be really pinpointing all the corporate interests, and also, I mean, who but a former labor of secretary, sorry, a former secretary of labor is more qualified to talk about this, right? That's kind of my opinion. And again, I understand that not everybody will agree with that, but the argument that he's making is that we are basically on the brink of another civil war, but it's not going to be like the last one. It's going to be red versus blue. And I actually think that we're very much, this is the direction that we're headed in. And before we start to unpack the differences that form the basis of his article between red and blue states, I want to quickly shout out / mention, is anyone familiar with the book Escape from America? I think I may have mentioned it before in one of our segments, but this is a book that I just found on a shelf in my parents' house. And growing up, we were heavily restricted with television use. We weren't allowed to use really electronics or listen to secular music. Anyway, what I'm trying to get is that I picked apart the bookshelf like every inch because that was my method of entertainment. This book, again, I read it at least 10, 15 years ago. And basically this book painted the picture, really what we're seeing now. And one of the main things that they focused on was abortion, and how most people never thought we'd ever be in this position, but we are very much heading towards a trajectory of authoritarianism. And we're a lot more conservative as a nation, as a whole, at least our leaders, than people think we are.
Yeah. Eric, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm just gonna disturb you like right now, but I just have to say one thing. Brandy, if you are still there, thank you so much for tuning in. And I am actually mentioning Brandy because, so Brandy, I was thinking about you when I was reading this, last article about New Jersey, the school in New Jersey and contamination, because I know you lost your mother young, when you were young, to a cancer, possible contamination at her workplace, if I'm not mistaken. And so I just wanted to, you were in my thoughts yesterday because it was Mother's Day, and I know that Mother's Day can be hard for all of us, for any of us who either lost your mother, in your life, early in your life, or lost in touch. So yeah, you were in my thoughts, and I just wanted to mention your name and your mom. And anytime that I'm like working on my anti-nuclear side of activism, like you and your mom are in my thoughts. So Brandy, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your activism as well. So okay, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, not at all. Why don't we begin? Okay. Before we begin to unpack this, I want to make one more side note, or I guess to put things into context. Tsukuru and I do not want, and if I'm speaking for you, please let me know if I'm not saying things correctly, but we're not trying to push this red versus blue. um, what is it? It's not a myth because it's very much real, but this red versus blue division. I truly believe that, the revolution, which we're really on the brink of it, people, believe it or not, it's going to be it's going to be driven by working class people, but it's going to be led by people of color. And there's going to be a lot of trans people leading that as well. All you got to do is look at the books of history. Anyway, aside. So I just want to say that before we start to unpack this, because again, while I think that it's a very interesting comparison to the divide that's going on in this country between quote unquote red and blue states, we are not trying to perpetuate this idea that we need to continue being divided by red versus blue. I just want to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, why don't you read this red states and then I'll read the blue states.
Okay. Okay. So while red states make it nearly impossible to get abortions, they are making it easier than ever to buy guns. Oh yeah. Even easier to carry concealed guns without a permit. They're suppressing votes. In Florida and Texas, teams of election police, quote unquote, have been created to crack down on the rare crime of voter fraud, another fallout from Trump's big lie. They're banning the teaching of America's history of racism. They're requiring transgender students to use bathrooms and join sports teams that reflect their gender at birth. They're making it harder to protest, more difficult to qualify for unemployment benefits or other forms of public assistance, and almost impossible to form labor unions. And they're passing bounty laws enforced not by governments, which can be sued in federal court, but by rewards to private citizens for filing lawsuits on issues ranging from classroom speech to abortions to vaccinations. God. Yeah, God. Quickly though, I'm sorry. It's just okay. So we didn't do this news today, but one of the news that we were kind of like toying with was this. I forgot like which state, but this openly queer art teacher in middle school, right? And she was actually fired from school because like she talked about her sexual orientation, and I mean she didn't even like make students draw this, but because students were drawing flags, I guess my understanding is. So some of them drew rainbow flags or transgender flags, right? I mean she wasn't even like making them draw that, but because like she talked about sexual orientation and like had this like class that where students can draw whatever the flags, including rainbow flags and transgender flags, she was fired, right? So anyway, yeah.
Okay, so let's read what is going on in the blue states. So blue, and before I read this is very much written by somebody who is somewhat invested in perpetuating this division between red and blue. I'm fully aware of that, and I just want to say that before we continue. Again, Robert Reich. While I do have respect for him, I do understand that he's invested in the Democratic Party. He's in a position of privilege to where these things don't necessarily affect him, and I disagree with him wholeheartedly. As far as perpetuating that, however, given the comparison between the two, the red states and the blue states, there's another comment I want to make after I read this, but I'll just put a pin in that in a second. But blue states are moving in the opposite direction. Several, including Colorado and Vermont, are codifying a right to abortion. Some are helping cover abortion expenses for out-of-staters. When Idaho proposed a ban on abortions that empowers relatives to sue anyone who helps terminate a pregnancy after 6 weeks, nearby Oregon approved $15 million to help cover the abortion expenses of patients from other states. Maryland and Washington have expanded access and legal protections to out-of-state abortion patients. One package of pending California bills would expand access to California abortions and protect abortion providers from out-of-state legal action. So, again, I want to make it very clear that Robert Reich has his bias, and he's very much structuring this as a referendum, between red and blue states. And what I want our viewers, our community to realize, and I think that we have a better sense of this than the general population, is that, at the end of the day, this is all a bunch of distracting bullshit. Let's be honest. All of this. And mind you, and again, maybe that's not the right term, because when we're talking about open carry permits, when we're talking about restricting and making miserable the lives of transgender kids, this is real human lives that are being affected. Let's not get it twisted. However, the thing that I really think is so important for all of us to realize is that everything that we just unpacked in this blue states versus red states comparison is all to distract from the heart of the issue, which is that corporate America runs our freaking government, and it is in the best interests of the corporations, which just experienced record profits in the middle of a pandemic that left many working class Americans completely devastated, right? Many working class Americans completely lost their savings, lost everything. The unhoused population skyrocketed, right? Not to mention how many have died of COVID, but they are invested. From my research, things like abortion, that's not an issue in certain European countries. They very much realize that restricting abortion access does nothing to limit the number of abortions, because the wealthy are going to be able to get their abortions no matter what. And what's really terrifying is that part of the note that he leaked, I think this is the part that we need to pay attention to, is he mentioned something about the birth. He literally talked about it as the birth rate as being a supply chain management issue.
Yeah.
People, hello. Why the flying fuck? Pardon me. Why are they restricting abortion rights? And look at where this is happening, right? All these southern states, all these red states. In other words, a lot of these states that take the most in assistance from the federal government, right? That's where abortion, they have a lot of these trigger laws, and that's where abortion rights will, inevitably disappear completely. But the corporations are worried about their access to labor, and they pretty much said it right there. That the reason why that this is a worry, again, our corporate government, who does nothing more than does the bidding of corporate America. Yeah, they are worried that they're gonna run out of workers, because it's become so goddamn expensive to survive in this country. Most millennials and most people that I talk to, we're not thinking about having kids. Are you kidding me? We can barely take care of ourselves. But furthermore, my question is, look, if life begins at conception, shouldn't child support as well? Right? Come on. And I think that might be the next step where we're headed. And that is when hopefully it doesn't take that long, but that's when I think the other Y chromosomes need to start paying attention.
Okay, I want to say two things before we log off, and I want to give you time to talk about your action as well. But hi, Yona, by the way. Konnichiwa. Okay, so yeah, I was in conversation with actually a trans woman friend of mine the other day, and then so first of all, I feel I think we should stop talking about abortion as solely a woman's issue, because it's not. I mean, men are involved in this, right? Because, yeah. I mean, even though it's a woman's body, I mean, men are involved in this. Like, just as you referred, to child support right now, right? So, it's everyone's issue, and we should be invested in this issue. Also, I am disturbed, because when we use this like kind of red versus blue rhetoric, we are always losing opportunity as an activist to organize across the party lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what should be happening here. Like Medicare for all, healthcare justice, like which Eric and I are, part of. I mean, that's one. But also like abortion issue. Okay, so Democrats really want to characterize this as like, okay, so Republicans are against abortions. But okay, so this trans friend of mine, actually, she comes from like conservative background, and she was pointing out that there are Republicans who are actually pro-choice as well. So we should like really, I mean, in my opinion, uh if there's an opportunity to organize across party lines, regardless of party affiliations, we should be doing that. You know,
That's a really good.
it's just really, we should not really succumb to this worldview that red versus blue and we can't get along, because we really should look at things issue based, not the party lines. So that's what I want to say.
That is a very good point, which really brings us to our next point. And I'm going to say this. I don't believe that many of the party's leaders who claim to be pro-choice actually are pro-choice. I think that lots of people on the Democratic side are actually anti-abortion. Which leads us to our event actually tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to go up to Nancy Pelosi's house yet again and demand that she hold hearings on these 5 justices who not only blatantly lied during their confirmation hearings, I believe it. I saw pro-life Dems protesting in DC in support of the ruling. I totally believe it. And the thing is, like, Joe Biden doesn't have a history of being pro-abortion rights. And for all this flexing that the Democratic Party and the speaker likes to do herself about being the first woman speaker, you would think that with how long she's been in the government, that would have been a priority of hers.
Right.
And we don't have any business letting the books of history forget that she acted purely in the interest of corporate America while she held this seat, her reign of terror. Like, what is she doing? Planning for 40 years. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be leading an action up there. It's coming up. It has come up rather quickly, and I will be speaking on behalf of Shahid Buttar's campaign. We also have SF Rising. We have a group called Ruth Sent, which is a group that kind of mobilized around the ideologies that were really lost on the court when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And I don't have to tell a fellow organizer that you can't really predict things like crowd size, or you can't really be disappointed about whoever shows up. What I wholeheartedly believe is that the people that matter are going to show up, and either way, no matter how many people show up, we're going to raise a stink in front of the speaker's house. Now is not the time to be quiet. And I think that this is something that the speaker is very vulnerable in. The day after these notes were leaked, her, Clyburn, and Steny Hoyer went to Texas to endorse an anti-abortion incumbent. That's really all. That's all you spells it all out right there.
Yep. Well, thank you, Eric, for going there. I wish I was, I wish I was able to join you, but I mean, so Yeah.
Oh, those people expect me there by now. I'm running in and out of that neighborhood so many times.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all. That's the time we have.
Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a wonderful week, everyone. And if you're in San Francisco, we'd love to see you at 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, join Eric if you can. And I guess okay, see you next week,
See
everyone.
you next week, everyone. Make it a great one.
All right. Let's see. So I have to play outro. Okay.